The resurgence in Deadlock's popularity has been a rather nice thing to see. However, it hasn't been without its problems. One thing that I've noticed is that a lot of content creators and streamers, especially those coming back to the game, or even those playing the game for the first time, there seems to be one complaint that I see shared very often. That being the problem of difficulty.
Problem, even with Overwatch as a game, we had to delegate tasks to other players in our team, right? Like thinking it. Like, think about this. Think about that. Playing the game, a shooter, takes a lot of... You have to be fucking so locked in. So compounding the map and items, what they're buying, all the info. And to do that as a player, well, it's just too much. Sorry. And feel the burden of having to be like at the office almost at every game. It's too much. That's my take. It's just a little bit too much.
This game is very, very deep. This is a second Dota. I'm gonna spend 17 minutes sitting here and reading tooltips before I even put left click to screen, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There was a time in my life when that's what I wanted out of a game. I still like to do that with Dota, but I had this moment where I went, this is a very, very, very hard game.
What I'm worried about is its complexity. I'm worried that it won't retain a general audience. And my fears could be unfounded because Valve has a track record of making complex games, famously Dota, which is so complicated that it has its own entry on a Wikipedia page explaining that very fact.
This is a sentiment shared by a lot of people, and honestly, I can't blame them for having this perception. Now, before I go into detail into this video, I just need to reiterate that, again, Deadlock is a MOBA first. It might have things like advanced movement, or even share DNA with things like Overwatch, because it is kinda like a hero shooter, but first and foremost, Deadlock is a MOBA. And like it or not, MOBAs are known for their difficulty. And to make it even worse, the lead developer of Deadlock is IceFrog, the guy who made Dota 2. And to compound this complexity even more, Dota, in my opinion, is probably the hardest MOBA that you can play out there, if not one of the hardest video games ever, period. So Deadlock having a lineage of complexity and being hard to play. And I'm not saying that Deadlock is going to be complex just for the sake of complexity, of course not. I feel like the bigger problem when it comes to Deadlock is an issue of onboarding, not so much of players not being able to grasp the fundamentals and mechanics of the game. Right now, the game's tutorial is limited to this little chair thing in the hideout, and when you click it, it only really shows you like short pre-recorded videos, and hell, these videos aren't even updated because it still shows the old map when it had 4 lanes. Obviously, this is placeholder, this game is far from finished, but that shouldn't excuse the fact that this tutorial simply does not do the job right. With a game with so many layers and complexity like Deadlock, it needs its tutorial to be comprehensive and easy to understand, and currently it is neither of those things. I'm struggling to find a way to convey my thoughts of Deadlock is a complex game, but unfortunately, it's only going to get worse from here. Even if Valve implements a proper tutorial and makes everything more digestible to new players, rest assured, IceFrog and Valve is going to make no attempts to simplify this game. Again, to draw a comparison to its predecessor Dota 2. Dota 2 has had so many comprehensive sweeping changes across the years that it's been memed that anytime that Dota has a huge patch, the joke is that Dota 2 is now Dota 3. It's happened multiple times when they added the talent system, and then later on they gave every hero an Aghanim Scepter upgrade. After that, they added the neutral system mechanic, and then after that they added facets and innates. That last one specifically changed so much about the game. Every hero now has 2 or more distinct ways for them to be played and built. That's already on top of the inherent hero build diversity that most MOBAs already have. I have a theory that Deadlock is going to implement some sort of loadout system that will allow different heroes to equip different types of weapons that will affect how they're played, essentially making all heroes have 2 distinct shooting styles. That's my theory, at least. Not to mention that Deadlock is still early in development and they're going to be adding a lot more characters to this game. In no way do I see Valve dumbing this game down. So then what's the solution? Will this game just become more and more complex to the point that it'll become basically impenetrable to new players? That's on top of the fact that MOBAs as a genre tend to attract what I like to call wiki-sexuals, like myself. People who like to read game wikis like they're Bibles, basically. I'll give you an example. Take the hero Nyx Assassin from Dota 2. His third spell is called Spiked Carapace. It's a pretty simple ability. My verbal description would be pretty simple. You press it, spikes come out of your character, and if you take damage, all of that damage is reflected and the enemy is stunned. Pretty simple. Then you read the spell description. Okay, it's a little more in-depth, but basically everything that I said is still here. Dota has this neat little feature where if you hold Alt, it'll show more information about the spell. Okay, just a little bit more info, but nothing too crazy. And then all of a sudden, you go to the Dota 2 wiki, and then this tiny little spell balloons into all of this. This is all the hidden interactions and all the little nitty-gritty details about the spell that the player might want to know. All of these words for a seemingly simple ability, and believe me, Deadlock will be no different. So what are the things that I think Valve is going to do to help ease new players into this game? Well, let's start off with something that the player can do themselves. Find familiar ground. Now we all know that Deadlock is supposed to be a MOBA. And for many people, that's already a source of familiarity. A lot of people play League of Legends, a lot of people play Dota. And if you're coming from those games, all you really need to know is learn what individual heroes do, and of course of the more unique game interactions and whatnot. But MOBA players are the ones who need the least amount of help easing into this game. It's the ones who are only really familiar with hero shooters or just shooters in general. However, there's still things to work with there. In fact, shooters are probably the most ubiquitous game type and game genre in the world. Everyone has played a shooter game at some point in their lives. And the ability to aim alone is already something that can help you ease into Deadlock. After all, that's kind of like what the laning phase is like in Deadlock. And if you have some background in hero shooters, then at the very least, Deadlock's unique designs have specific heroes that fit very familiar archetypes. You know, your tanks, your roamers, your assassins, your supports. Of course, the option to build different items expounds on this far bigger. A support can become a carry with a proper build. But, you know, as a starting point, this is a good place for people who haven't experienced MOBAs before. I myself have a lot of background when it comes to MOBAs and RTSs. And as I've famously said in my previous videos, I'm not very good at FPS games. So my ability to aim is not really good. It's actually for that reason why most of the time I play spellcasters or spirit-heavy builds, because it relies on aiming far less. Yes, I'm coping, and yes, I realize that I'm a bad player. So, moving forward, what do I think Valve is going to end up doing for Deadlock in regards to this complexity situation? Well, of course, number one is adding a tutorial. And despite what some people have been saying, I don't know why they say Valve is bad at making in-depth tutorials. If your benchmark is TF2, then yeah, sure, TF2's tutorial sucks ass. But Dota had an update that was purely dedicated to the onboarding process of new players. I forget what it was called, but it was basically Tutorial the Update, where everything in this update was all about quality of life features and adding new gameplay mechanics and learning resources for the player. New players have the option to request for a coach in-game. That was a huge thing. And knowing that, I think Valve will implement some sort of system like that into Deadlock. Another way that they can probably ease new players into the game is by implementing more casual game modes. Because the normal MOBA game mode is always going to be extremely time consuming. I've had games in Deadlock and Dota which can last almost, if not longer than an hour. That's on top of all the other stresses of needing to learn how different characters work and etc, etc. So by implementing casual game modes will definitely help new players ease into the game. And MOBAs are already familiar with this. In Dota, you have Turbo and Arcade mode. In League of Legends, you have ARAM and whatever the fuck else they do. However, one problem with these game modes in those MOBAs is that they always felt supplemental. They always felt like something you play on the side, every now and then. And yes, I know that there's people who exclusively play these game modes, but again, there's not that many of them, and it is very clear that these are supposed to be something you do on the side. In order for Deadlock to really capture a casual audience, I feel like if it adds other game modes, these other game modes need to feel like the game modes in TF2. In TF2, it has many game modes that you can play, and many of them feel like they are core pillars of the game itself. You know, you can't really say that you've had the true TF2 experience unless you've played Payload, King of the Hill, Capture the Flag, Capture Points, etc. All of the game modes in TF2 feel core to its foundation. For the most part, other than like pastime, but you know, we don't count those. And it's very likely that Deadlock at some point in the future will add these types of game modes. Not one-to-one, obviously. It's probably going to have to do some tweaking in order to make it fit into the gameplay mode of Deadlock. But my point is, Deadlock is going to add other game modes for sure. and whatever these other game modes might be will probably be the ones to cater to the casual player base. Imagine a payload style map or King of the Hill style map. You still control the heroes from Deadlock, so at the very least a new player will still familiarize themselves with the heroes, but at the very least the game mode will be relatively low stakes. Maybe there's no item progression, or at the very least maybe there's gonna be no minions, maybe there's gonna be no map objectives. That will allow a new player to focus all of their attention on learning the hero matchups. And eventually, after maybe a couple dozen or so games, maybe after a while, they'll feel comfortable enough to jump into another game mode. Maybe it can be like a ladder, where one game mode is super simple, another one is slightly more complex, and the final game mode is the original game mode where you have to defend and destroy each other's patrons. I think that would be a very simple way for people to be eased into the true MOBA experience that Deadlock can offer them, without scaring new players away. I think Valve knows that they've struck gold when it comes to Deadlock and its concept. And right now, the biggest barrier is, obviously, the game isn't out yet, but on top of that, the knowledge that games are difficult and that not everybody has the time to learn these games. But at the same time, I find it rather interesting that people are complaining about Deadlock being very difficult, but these are also the type of players who will complain that video games as a whole are being dumbed down. I can remember quite a few games that people were complaining about, whether they be single player or multiplayer. People have been complaining for years now that games have been simplified, streamlined, the sauce is not there anymore.
The yellow paint phenomenon is one that has been extensively documented within the environments of the gaming world. For years, artists have marked certain points of interest with splashes of paint to demonstrate where players need to go or what they can interact with.
And then all of a sudden, they see a game, Deadlock, which isn't afraid to just show off its sheer complexity and the possibilities that you can do in this game. And some people absolutely love it for that. I love Deadlock because it is not afraid to show off that it's going to be an insanely deep and complex game. And to these same people, they're afraid of that, maybe because they're just not used to this type of complexity or density of mechanics. Have you seen some of the tech that you can do in this game? The movement tech alone is already incredible, and then you have stuff like viscous punch jumps and drifter teleport lineups. It's insane, and this game is only gonna get more complex, not less. And I think the biggest way that Valve can address this problem is not by dumbing it down, but instead making that learning curve into a more manageable slope. I've heard a joke talking about Dota 2's learning curve that the curve itself is almost a straight vertical line. And well, I don't think Deadlock's is that bad, but if they can implement ways to make that curve less aggressively vertical to help ease players into it, I think it'll be good. And again, this game is still early in development. There is so much work that still needs to be done, and I know Valve aren't stupid. They know that they want this game to succeed, and by adding easier pick up and play game modes will definitely help people, and of course a more in-depth tutorial, but time will tell. Who knows? But one thing that I absolutely can assure you is they're not going to make any attempts to make this game simpler. I'm sorry if this game is too complex. I hear that Call of Duty is open this time of year. I hear the crayons taste good over there. You can go play that game.
But I don't think that that's the sauce of this game. Battle Royale for this would be fire. I know you don't.
But Deadlock shows its complexities on its sleeve. Sorry if this video was a bit messy. I just kind of recorded this in one go and I'm still feeling kind of sick. And I just wanted to pump out a video real quick. So what do you think, Internet Wanderer? Do you think Deadlock's complexity is a detriment or an advantage? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section down below. That's going to be it from me, Internet Wanderer. Thanks for watching. Do the YouTube things.